It was a Monday morning and I sat at the kitchen table, savoring my breakfast with a cup of coffee. The morning newspaper lay open in front of me, filled with the latest sports updates, when my wife Ella broke the quiet. "Adam, can you put the paper down? I need to talk to you." Her voice carried a weight, signaling that this was serious. I set the paper aside and looked at her, bracing myself for what was coming. "I'm leaving you, Adam. I want a divorce." Her tone was flat, but I could see the resolve simmering in her eyes. A mix of anger and relief surged through me, and I shrugged nonchalantly, turning back to the sports section. "Is that it?" I asked, my voice steady. Ella's irritation was palpable as her voice tightened. "I mean it, Adam." I feigned ignorance, aware I had seen this coming for months. I could feel her frustration growing, but I was ready to move on. Her decision, though unexpected, felt like a release from the tension that had filled our lives. In that moment, I understood this was not just an ending, but an opportunity for a new beginning, allowing me to reclaim my life without her weight on my shoulders. She persisted, anger bubbling up as I continued to ignore her. Finally, she snapped, "Damn it, Adam! Put down the paper and talk to me about this." I set it aside and looked at her, my face as calm as I could make it. "What's there to talk about, Ella? Goodbye, I guess. You haven't been a wife in any sense for a long time now, so just go." My tone was colder than I intended, but I couldn't help it. I stood up, walked to my office, and returned with a notepad and an envelope. I scribbled a quick note on the top sheet, something I'd mentally drafted months ago. "To Brandon, thanks for taking her off my hands. Here's hoping she keeps you satisfied." It was petty, but I couldn't resist. For a final twist, I added a lottery ticket I'd bought the night before and tucked everything into the envelope. With a smirk, I handed it to her. "When you see him, give him this." Ella's face went pale as she realized I'd known about her affair all along. She stammered, looking away, but I was done letting her off the hook. "Just because you thought I was clueless doesn't mean I actually was, Ella," I said, struggling to hold back a bitter laugh. When she reached for the envelope in my hand, I held it back. "Actually, I think I'll mail it myself. I don't trust you not to read it and throw it away." With that, I turned, grabbed my coat and keys, feeling the weight lift slightly as I took my first steps toward reclaiming my life. As I walked out, I called over my shoulder, "By the way, pack up and leave by the weekend." Ella's voice rose behind me, yelling that she wasn't going anywhere and wouldn't let me take the house. Her words echoed but quickly faded as I closed the door, her anger becoming just background noise. My focus was now on what needed to be done, on regaining my own space, and on clearing out the remnants of a relationship built on lies. That day marked the start of my freedom, the beginning of moving on from someone who never deserved my trust. That day, I went to the bank and closed our joint accounts, transferring everything into a new account solely in my name. I also canceled our credit cards and opened new ones for myself. The entire drive to work, I felt lighter, almost amused. I stayed late that evening, sharing drinks with Sarah, my assistant of 8 years, who knew more about my situation than anyone else. Sarah and I joked around, and as the drinks flowed, I half-jokingly mentioned I'd be back on the market soon. She gave me a sly smile, saying, "Forget about other women, Adam. I might just take you up on that offer myself." I laughed, a little taken aback, but secretly pleased. For years, we'd had a good working relationship, but I'd never realized she might be interested in more. I didn't dismiss her words, but instead told her about Ella's affair in more detail, and she listened intently, her sympathy both comforting and oddly invigorating. As the night went on, Sarah's blunt advice surprised me. "If you let Ella take the reins and file for divorce, you're giving her the upper hand, Adam. You need to file first. That way you're in control." I'd been thinking about sitting back, letting Ella make her move, but Sarah was right. If I waited, she could claim anything, even try to force me out of the house. I felt a chill at the thought of losing everything I'd worked for, all because I hadn't acted swiftly. Sarah's words resonated, and it became clear. I needed to be the one making the first move, taking charge before things got messy. The next day, I called my old friend and lawyer, Tom. He'd seen me through thick and thin, so I knew I could count on him now. I explained the situation, outlining Ella's affair and her refusal to leave, and he agreed to meet up during lunch to start the paperwork. "And just for good measure," I added, I'd like to file a restraining order. Ella's been making some strongly worded threats. Tom chuckled, catching the hint of defiance behind my words, but agreed to proceed. We both knew the restraining order might complicate things, but it would also send a clear message that her games were over. The goal was simple. I wanted Ella out of the house and out of my life as soon as possible. The legal process might take time, but I was ready for it, and with Tom's expertise, I felt confident this chapter would soon close. Walking away from someone I once loved wasn't easy, but clinging to the past would have been worse. I could finally see a future without the lies and betrayal, one where I had full control over my life again. This wasn't just about ending a marriage, it was about regaining peace, dignity, and freedom. With Tom's help, I was prepared to see it through. By Thursday, I'd signed the divorce papers and felt a weight lifting. I spent the weekend putting my life in order, both mentally and physically, ridding the house of any remnants of Ella. Sarah had kept her promise to be there for me, meeting up for coffee and talking through my plans for the future. She was right. If I wanted to reclaim control of my life, I couldn't keep looking back. I had to start over with intention. As we sat together that Sunday, I realized that the worst chapter of my life was finally coming to a close, and the future, though uncertain, was suddenly brighter. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I dialed the first number on my list, a close friend, Joe. I wanted him to hear the news from me, and not through a grapevine of speculation. "Hey, Joe, I thought you should know Kathy and I are getting a divorce," I told him. After a pause, he asked what had happened, and I briefly explained that it had been brewing for a while. Joe sighed, offering his support and some words of encouragement. This process wasn't just about making sure Kathy faced consequences for her actions, but also about reclaiming a sense of peace for myself. After a few more calls, I felt like the weight was beginning to lift. Later that afternoon, Maria stopped by my office. She was curious about how everything was progressing and seemed genuinely interested in seeing me move on from Kathy. I appreciated her concern, though I felt hesitant about diving headfirst into anything new. "What are you planning this weekend?" she asked, her voice full of warmth and a hint of mischief. I shrugged, not quite ready to think about romance yet, but open to the possibility. Maria had been a steady friend and colleague over the years, and though I hadn't expected her interest, it felt oddly comforting. When I returned home that evening, there was a lingering silence in the house. Kathy's car was nowhere in sight, and the sense of emptiness in our once shared space was both a relief and a sting. I wandered through the house, noticing things here and there that would no longer remind me of her. Every corner seemed to hold a piece of our past, now shadowed by betrayal. A sense of finality settled over me as I realized how much this life had changed. The house, now mine alone, felt like a blank canvas on which I could rebuild my life. The next morning, Maria and I met for coffee at the local cafe. We spoke about work, my plans, and her ambitions, laughing and sharing stories that had nothing to do with the past few days. She brought a fresh energy that I hadn't felt in years, helping me see the possibilities that lay ahead. When she casually mentioned taking a day trip to the lake, I couldn't resist the idea. It was a welcome break from the tension that had filled my life recently, and being around someone who saw me for who I was, without the baggage, felt like a breath of fresh air. As we sat in the sun, sipping our drinks and enjoying the moment, I realized how much I craved this kind of connection. Someone who could uplift me and bring joy back into my life. The thought of escaping to the lake filled me with excitement. It felt like a chance to reset, to breathe, and to shed the weight of my past. I wanted to explore this new chapter with Maria, and I could tell she was equally interested. It wasn't just about finding solace from the chaos of my recent life, but also about embracing new beginnings. Together, we could carve out our own space away from the memories that haunted me, and I was eager to see where this journey might lead us. By the weekend, I had started embracing the changes, finding solace in the idea of a new beginning, packing away the remnants of Kathy's life, and finally setting aside the painful memories left me feeling lighter. As I watched the sunset from my now peaceful, empty house, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. With Kathy officially out of my life, I could finally focus on building something new, rooted in honesty and free from betrayal. Though the path ahead was uncertain, it was mine to walk, and I was ready to take that step forward. The months that followed were a whirlwind of change and healing, with my life taking unexpected turns I could hardly have imagined. The fallout from Kathy's betrayal had long since faded into the past, and the clarity I'd gained from my conversation with her former lover had been surprisingly liberating. Tyrone's honesty about his own misguided involvement with Kathy had offered me some closure, allowing me to fully distance myself from the toxicity she'd brought into my life. Surprisingly, I'd come to appreciate that strange encounter at the Hilton more than I'd initially thought, as it had truly set me on a path to closure. As I embraced this new chapter, I found myself more open to new experiences and relationships. I spent more time with Maria, who had quickly become a beacon of light amid the darkness. Our day trips to the lake and coffee dates evolved into deeper conversations, revealing dreams and aspirations we both held. I started pursuing passions I had long neglected, from photography to hiking, rediscovering parts of myself that had been overshadowed for years. Each day felt like a new opportunity, and with every passing moment, I felt stronger and more resilient. Life, it seemed, was inviting me to step forward, and I was ready to seize the future with both hands, grateful for the lessons learned and the strength I'd gained along the way. Meanwhile, Maria and I had continued our slow but steady journey towards building a new life together. We'd moved in together shortly after my divorce finalized, and although I had been hesitant to jump back into a committed relationship, Maria's kindness and patience had been exactly what I needed. Our love grew in a way that felt authentic and grounded, and when she told me she was expecting, my heart raced with excitement. We were going to be parents, and the knowledge filled me with both awe and responsibility. The news of twins had been a delightful surprise, though I was keenly aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Our home was soon filled with the sounds of laughter, conversations about nursery colors, and the thrill of anticipation. I'd come a long way from the man who was once buried under the weight of betrayal and bitterness, and I found myself thanking Maria for all the love and joy she'd brought into my life. This family we were creating together was my new purpose, and the prospect of fatherhood was something I eagerly embraced. Professionally, things were equally fulfilling. My assistant Jan, always quick with a witty comment, was thrilled to hear about Maria and the upcoming twins. She would often sneak in baby tips and advice as we worked, and our office became a space of shared joy as everyone rallied around to celebrate. The chatter about diapers and nursery themes blended with our usual banter, creating an atmosphere of camaraderie that made the workplace feel more like a community. My productivity soared, and I found myself enjoying my work with renewed enthusiasm, knowing that I was building a future not just for myself, but for the family that awaited me at home. With each passing day, I felt more connected to my purpose, balancing the demands of my career with the anticipation of becoming a father. I embraced every opportunity to share in the excitement of Maria's journey, whether it was attending prenatal classes together or simply discussing names over coffee breaks. This sense of shared purpose transformed not just my home life, but also how I approached my career. I tackled projects with a fresh perspective, eager to prove to myself and those around me that I was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The past had taught me invaluable lessons about resilience and the importance of surrounding myself with positive influences. And now, as I looked toward the future, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the people who supported me along the way. Life had a way of turning the page, and I was excited to see what the next chapter would bring. Looking back, I saw that every hardship, every painful memory, had ultimately led me to where I was meant to be. With Maria by my side and two little lives on the way, I was no longer the person I had been during those dark days of my marriage to Kathy. Life had come full circle, and I was grateful for the journey that had brought me here. It wasn't a perfect story, but it was mine. And in the quiet moments as I held Maria's hand, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be.